Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin by staring unflinchingly into the mirror of our age. A mirror polished to a deceptive sheen by the breathless promises of self-help. That sprawling cathedral of quick fixes and curated transcendence. A mirror that reflects not our faces but our fantasies. Not our limitations but our laziness. For what is this industry with its gleaming bestsellers and algorithmic affirmations, if not the secular priesthood of a civilization that has traded the sword for the safety blanket, the quest for the checklist, the heroic journey for the bullet-pointed life hack? And yet, dare we name the unspoken truth, that this pursuit of self-improvement is a hall of mirrors, a masturbatory ritual where the soul gazes endlessly at its own reflection, mistaking the act of looking for the courage to leap. Nietzsche, that unrelenting prophet of the abyss, would call this decadence, the slow rot of a culture that prefers the anesthetic of illusion to the scalpel of truth. Imagine, if you will, a world where Sisyphus pauses midway up the mountain to journal about his gratitude for the rock, where Prometheus, chained to his cliff, soothes himself with mantras about accepting what he cannot change, where Odysseus, lost at sea, downloads a podcast on navigating life storms, instead of tightening the sails. This is the farce of modern self-help. A pantomime of progress that substitutes the sweat of struggle for the smugness of slogans. Nietzsche, who declared God dead and the human spirit suffocating under the weight of its own lies, would see in our Instagrammed affirmations and productivity trackers the same sickness that plagued 19th century Europe. A fear of life's terrifying vitality. A retreat into the warm, amniotic bath of petty comforts. We have replaced the agon, the sacred contest of ancient Greece, where men tested their mettle against fate, with the sterile rituals of morning routines and life audits. We have exchanged the thunderous question, what dare I become, for the whimper of how can I feel okay? But let us dissect this corpse of decadence with Nietzsche's own hammer. Decadence, he teaches us, is not mere moral decay but a physiological surrender. A species-wide preference for numbness over intensity, for the palliative over the prophetic. Consider the self-help industry's obsession with hacks and shortcuts. Those digital snake oils that promise transformation without friction. The dopamine hit of finishing a motivational book without ever confronting the gap between its platitudes and our mediocrity. The cult of self-care that pathologizes ambition as toxic and rebrands complacency as mindfulness. Nietzsche, in Twilight of the Idols, scoffs at such idlers' morality. This religion of the comfortable who preach moderation, while secretly fearing the fire of greatness. For what is a balanced life, but a euphemism for a life half-lived? What is self-acceptance, but the cowardice of those who lack the stomach to smash their own idols? And yet, how cunningly this decadence disguises itself as empowerment. The modern soul, armed with gratitude journals and vision boards, believes itself a warrior when it is merely a courtier, a slave draped in the robes of sovereignty. Nietzsche's Zarathustra warns of such self-deception. You call yourself free? Let me hear your ruling thought, not that you have escaped a yoke. The tyranny of positivity, the tyranny of good vibes only, the tyranny of a culture that pathologizes despair as negative thinking. These are the invisible chains of our age. We have been taught to confuse comfort for freedom, affirmation for truth, and the endless curation of our best selves for the messy, magnificent work of becoming. But let us ask, when we repeat, I am enough, do we not secretly hear the hiss of the serpent whispering? Enough for what? Enough to settle? Enough to stagnate? Enough to silence the restless hunger that once drove explorers to oceans and philosophers to the edge of reason. Ah, but the crowd objects. Does self-help not inspire action? Does it not spark change? To which we must reply with a Nietzschean roar. What manner of action is this? The entrepreneur who grinds herself into burnout to meet arbitrary metrics of success. The deeder enslaved by the tyranny of macros, mistaking the atrophy of desire for discipline. The addict swapping substances for seminars, trading one form of anesthesia for another. These are not victories but substitutions. Proof of Nietzsche's grim diagnosis that decadence would rather will nothingness than not will. For the will to power, that primordial force he hailed as the essence of life, has been reduced to the will to distraction, the will to numb, the will to scroll, to consume, to tick boxes on a prefabricated path to a pre-approved version of happiness. Where is the individual who, like Nietzsche's Übermensch, creates values rather than consumes them? Who wields their chaos like a chisel to sculpt a self that terrifies and exhilarates? Let us turn our gaze to the heart of the illusion. The self-help industry, like all decadent systems, thrives on a fundamental lie. That the self is a problem to be solved rather than a paradox to be lived. It offers solutions, as if the soul were a malfunctioning appliance. Plug in this 7-step program. Download this meditation app, and presto, inner peace. But Nietzsche, that poet of existential vertigo, laughs at such naivete. For him, the self is not a static entity but a storm, a battlefield, a ceaseless becoming. Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Übermensch. He writes, a rope over an abyss. The self-help industry would have us inch along this rope sideways, eyes fixed on our feet, terrified of the void below and the heights above. But the Übermensch dances on the rope, laughing into the abyss, understanding that the fall is not failure but the price of flight. Consider now the language of this decadence. Words like toxic and triggering, applied not to poisons or weapons but to discomfort itself. The vilification of suffering, that great teacher, as something to be healed rather than harnessed. Nietzsche, who called suffering the womb of all greatness, would weep at our weakness, or perhaps he would snarl. For in our quest to eliminate struggle, we have sterilized growth. The athlete who avoids the gym to protect her peace. The thinker who shuns controversial ideas to preserve his zen. The lover who flees passion to evade heartbreak. These are not enlightened beings but ghosts, pale imitations of life's roaring flame. And what of technology, that great enabler of decadence? Algorithms that feed us content tailored to our existing biases, turning the internet into a cathedral of echoes. Apps that gamify self-improvement, reducing the hero's journey to a series of achievement badges. Social media, where followers are confused for disciples and likes for validation. Nietzsche, who warned against the herd instinct and celebrated the solitude of creators, would see in these tools the perfect machinery for mass self-delusion. For how can one hear the call to greatness over the din of notifications? How can one stare into the abyss when the abyss is pixelated, filtered, and set to a lo-fi beat? But let us not mistake critique for despair. Nietzsche's philosophy, though unsparing in its diagnosis, pulses with a remedy, one far more demanding than the placebo of self-help. The will to power is not a slogan but a summons, to embrace struggle as the forge of the self, to seek out resistance as the sculptor seeks marble, not to conquer it, but to let it reveal what we might become. The climber does not grow stronger on a stairmaster. She is forged on the cliff face. The thinker does not find truth in echo chambers, but in the collision of opposing ideas. The lover does not discover passion in safety, but in the surrender to vulnerability. This is the antithesis of self-help's pampered path. A philosophy that demands we lose ourselves to find ourselves. That worships not comfort but the sacred yes shouted into life's storm. History's exemplars light the way. Van Gogh, who painted starry nights from the asylum's window. Beethoven, who composed symphonies in silence. Mandela, who emerged from 27 years of prison not with a vision board but with a vision. These are not products of self-help, but of self-annihilation. The willingness to be shattered and reborn in the kiln of suffering. Nietzsche's dictum, "Become what you are," is not an affirmation but a revolution. It demands we interrogate every inherited value, every comfortable lie, every ritual of numbness that keeps us small. It is a call to arms against the tyrant within. So where does this leave us? Shall we burn our self-help books? Perhaps. But more urgently, we must incinerate the cowardice that reaches for them, to replace the security of 10 steps to success with the terrifying freedom of self-authorship, to trade the mirror for the hammer, the echo for the anthem, the algorithm for the abyss. Let us close not with a checklist but a challenge. Dare to want more than comfort. Dare to need nothing. Dare to let your hunger roar louder than your fear. For as Nietzsche reminds us, the antidote to decadence is not a better philosophy but a braver life. One lived with a holy yes to the highest suffering, the deepest guilt, the most radiant joy. The hour is late. The idols of comfort, the altars of mediocrity, the temples of self-delusion. They crumble already under the weight of their own emptiness. Will you be among the wreckage? Or will you rise, hammer in hand, to meet the dawn? And what of the language of this marketplace? Words like healing and trauma. Once profound, now flattened into buzzwords to sell yoga retreats. The term self-love, weaponized to shame the restless into complacency. You are enough. Beku. A mantra that, stripped of context, becomes a life sentence to mediocrity. Nietzsche's Zarathustra would howl at this betrayal. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. He thunders, but the self-help industrial complex would have us build bridges to nowhere, circling endlessly in the shallow waters of self-acceptance, while the ocean of possibility roars unseen. Let us name the mechanism. This industry does not cure inadequacy, it cultivates it, by framing life's inherent struggles as pathologies to be fixed. It pathologizes the human condition itself. The young man's restlessness becomes anxiety, to be meditated away. The woman's ambition becomes toxicity, to be cleansed. The artist's creative despair becomes a limiting belief, to be reframed. Nietzsche, who celebrated the healthiness of the sick, and saw greatness in the tension of contradictions, would decry this lobotomy of the soul. For him, the disease of dissatisfaction was the engine of evolution, the divine discontent that propelled Prometheus to steal fire and Icarus to kiss the sun. To pathologize suffering is to neuter the soul's ambition, to chain the climber at the base of the mountain and call it self-care. Ah, but the defenders protest. Does this not help people? To which we must reply, help them what? To sleepwalk through life with a Xanax smile. To mistake the numbness of surrender for peace? Nietzsche's answer lies in the gay science. The secret of the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment of existence is to live dangerously. Compare this to the self-help ethos of safe spaces and trigger warnings. A world shrink-wrapped in bubble wrap, where every sharp edge is padded and every shadow is lit by the blue glow of a smartphone. Where is the danger? The risk? The stakes? We have become a civilization of Icaruses who fear the wax on our wings more than the atrophy of never flying. And here we arrive at the heart of the corruption. The replacement of eros with consumption, where once the soul's yearning drove poets to madness and explorers to uncharted seas. Now it is funneled into the click of a buy now button. The ache for transcendence is redirected into a craving for content. Another book, another webinar, another app. Nietzsche's will to power becomes the will to purchase. The fire of becoming reduced to the flicker of a credit card transaction. Even our rebellions are branded. Mindfulness starter kits, anti-anxiety playlists, digital detox packages, sold by the very platforms that addict us. This is decadence perfected. By Ouroboros of desire and denial, where we pay to escape the prisons we pay to build. Yet there is a way out, not through another program, but through the razor's edge of self-interrogation. Nietzsche's philosophy offers no checklist, no guarantees. Only the terrifying invitation to become, to stare into the void and laugh, to embrace the chaos within as the raw material of creation, to recognize that every flaw the self-help industry monetizes is a thread in the tapestry of our potential. The anxiety that haunts you? It is the shadow of your unlived greatness, the restlessness that keeps you awake. It is the drumbeat of a destiny refusing to be domesticated. The path forward is not self-help, but self-rupture, a violent unshackling from the gilded cages of wellness and optimization, a return to what Nietzsche called the school of suspicion, not toward the world, but toward the lies we've swallowed about ourselves. Let us reject the tyranny of should and reclaim the madness of what if. Let us trade our gratitude journals for manifestos of defiance, our vision boards for vows of creative war. For the antidote to decadence is not more discipline, but more life. Unfiltered, unapologetic, and ravenous. So I ask you, will you remain a consumer of salvation, forever chasing the next quick fix? Or will you tear the mask off the oracle and demand the raw, unedited truth, that you are not a problem to be solved, but a question to be lived? The hour is late. The carnival barkers of comfort grow louder, but somewhere beyond the neon, the abyss awaits, not to swallow you, but to baptize you in the fire of your own becoming. Will you take the match? Let us now arrive at the precipice, the edge where all great truths either paralyze or propel, where the carnival of self-help's empty promises fades into silence, and the raw, unmediated reality of existence roars like a forge. Here, at this threshold, we must choose. Will we retreat into the gilded cage of self-optimization? Or will we leap into the Nietzschean abyss, where the only safety is the audacity of our becoming? For this is the final truth, the one no bestseller will print. The cure for decadence is not more self-help, but more self-destruction. The annihilation of the coddled, curated I, to make way for the volcanic, ungovernable overman. Consider Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, that thought experiment of ultimate accountability. What if you had to relive this life as you've lived it, for eternity? Would your gratitude journals and productivity apps sustain you? Or would the horror of infinite repetition, the same safe choices, the same deluded dreams, drive you to smash the mirror of complacency? The self-help industry, with its obsession with progress, cannot fathom this question. It thrives on the myth of linear time, of tidy arcs and guaranteed rewards. But Nietzsche's challenge is a cyclone, tearing the roof off our dollhouse lives. It asks, is your existence a song worth repeating, or merely background noise in the hum of a decadent age? Let us be clear. This is not a call to nihilism, but to sacred rebellion, to the kind of creation that begins with demolition. The Übermensch does not find themselves through affirmations. They forge themselves in the crucible of chaos. They understand, as Nietzsche did, that one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. But chaos terrifies the modern psyche. We medicate it, monetize it, mute it with mindfulness. We call our fear of it anxiety, and our domestication of it healing. Yet Nietzsche whispers, your chaos is your genius. Your rage is your compass. Your despair is the ink with which you'll write your epic. Look around you. The world burns with crises begging for mythic responses. Climate collapse, algorithmic alienation, spiritual famine. And what does self-help offer? Carbon footprint journals, digital detox retreats, climate anxiety meditations, palliative care for a terminal condition. Nietzsche would sneer at these band-aids on bullet wounds. He'd demand we revalue all values. To ask not, how can I cope? But what can I create? Not, how do I survive the storm? But, how do I become the storm? The path forward is neither easy nor assured. It demands the courage to abandon the lifeboat of certainty for the riptide of becoming, to trade the security of follow your passion for the peril of embrace your obsession, to see suffering not as a glitch but as the grindstone that sharpens purpose. This is the antithesis of self-help's transactional worldview. It offers no guarantees, only the gauntlet of authenticity. No five-step plan, only the fire of a question. What would you dare if failure were your sacrament and doubt your compass? History's titans light the way, not the influencers of Instagram, but the heretics and holy fools who danced with their demons. Van Gogh, who traded sanity for starry nights. Frida Kahlo, who painted her pain into monuments. Nietzsche himself, scribbling prophecies in the lonely Alps as his mind unraveled. These were not optimized beings. They were wildfires. Reckless, radiant, and ravenous. They understood what we've forgotten. That greatness is not a product of balance, but of imbalance. of leaning so far into your hunger that the world must shift to catch you. So let us now, in these final moments, perform a funeral for the trivial. Let us bury the bullet-pointed life, cremate the best self, scatter the ashes of enough, and in their place, let us erect a pyre, a beacon for those brave enough to burn with questions rather than rot with answers. Let your mantra be Nietzsche's cry from Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Dead are all gods. Now we will that the overmen live. The choice is upon you. You may return to the world of self-help, to its warm platitudes and measured ambitions, or you may rip the veil and stare, unblinking, into what Nietzsche called the terrible truth of existence. The truth that you are not a star to be wished upon, but a supernova waiting to happen, that your weaknesses are the raw ore of strength, that your darkest hour is the womb of dawn. Go now, not with a plan but with a vow, not to live your truth, but to blow it apart. Let your life be a revolt against the mediocre, a hymn to the unmanaged, a middle finger to the tyranny of enough. For in the end, decadence cannot be defeated, only defied. And defiance begins when you answer the abyss not with a mantra, but with a roar. The hammer is in your hand. The idols are brittle. Swing.